Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. Always warm, always sunny, sometimes Colorado. Today is January 16th, 2024, and it is a very interesting time. Next week, heading over to Las Vegas for World of Concrete and trying not to have a hard time there while I learn all about the latest and greatest concrete technology. 1,000 vendors, 35,000 people. And then I will be hopping on a jet, flying over to Scotland directly from Las Vegas to attend an event called Qsig. So I'm going to go ahead and share the link here for you guys. And I'll tell you a little bit about this event, what makes it special. So this is the link for it. And let me go ahead and share my screen. Wah! Here we go. Okay, so Qsig is something that we're putting on with the Ethereum Foundation and the University of Edinburgh. And it's where this came from was that we wrote a paper in 2020. A lot of people ignored it. It's called One-Shot Signatures and Applications to Hybrid Quantum and Classical Authenticity. So we wrote it with Ryan and a few other people. You can see Agalos on the paper. And Ryan's out of Princeton, and Mark is also out of Princeton. And there's an author from CUNY as well, Marios. And what makes this paper so special is that it starts exploring the intersection of classical and quantum computing and saying, well, if we had some quantum construct, what we can do is construct a signature that basically self-destructs after you use it. Now, if you could do this, then suddenly you could introduce quantum money with classical communication. You can actually have blockchain-less cryptocurrencies, and you can have signature schemes that have unclonable secret keys, non-interactive certifiable minimum entropy, and a boatload of other applications. So it's one of those things where when you look ahead to where the world is going, so the world of quantum computers, and asking with this new technology, what are we able to construct? So we had a lot of fun writing the paper, and it was a nice forward-thinking paper. And then Justin Drake from the Ethereum Foundation seemed to have stumbled across it, and his mind was opened up by all the incredible possibilities. So he reached out to Agalos, and the artifact of that is this event that's taking place January 26th between 9 and 5 at the University of Edinburgh. And there's a little committee that was put together. So Agalos and Petros and Alexandru came together with Justin. And there's about 35, 40 people, I think, that are currently registered for the workshop. So it's not really a super duper public event. It's not like a cryptocurrency conference. This is actually an academic conversation. And what I'm hoping to get out of it, because I'll actually be there myself, is a discussion of what are the next steps in evolving this paper from pure blue ocean research to more applied research, and then translating that into a product development, and what can be accomplished and emulated with a classical computer versus what is actually required with an actual quantum computer. So in other words, could we emulate one-shot signatures with an ASIC and get very similar results without actually having to have a complete quantum computer? And what would that look like, and what would a horizon look like? So if you're curious about this topic, what I would recommend to do is there's two books that are quite accessible. So one is Quantum Computing for Everybody, and that's from Chris Bernhardt. And he took a lot of time to create a really nice 200-page book that provides a pretty good introduction to quantum computing and what makes it special and interesting. And it does it in a very handholdy way. So it's not a super complex book to get through relative to the field. You know, all things are relative. So it's still a book. It talks about entanglement and teleportation and quantum algorithms and these types of things, but it's a lot more accessible than most textbooks. But I'm a good fan of Andy Matisak's work, and he's a really cool and interesting guy. He used to work for Khan Academy, and he thinks a lot about new ways of structuring websites and learning. And he wrote a lovely essay, Why Books Don't Work. And what he tried to do is align a book with techniques that people use to learn, like interleaving and spaced recall and these types of concepts. And then he said, well, it's not good enough just to talk about that. It would be really cool to actually write a book as an example of how to enhance recall. So he wrote a book called Quantum Country. And it's a free book, and it's an introduction to quantum computing, quantum mechanics. And he wrote it with Michael Nelson. And basically, it's written in a way to try to maximize recall for people. So it's actually a pretty cool text, and it's a very novel introduction to quantum computing. So highly recommend these two resources. And this is probably a better book to self-study from, but this is a really good book to get an understanding of the topic as a whole. The point is that this is the beginning of the next generation of technology. And, when you look at our industry, it's kind of moving in a lot of different directions at the same time. So the zero knowledge side of the direction is probably the most advanced and interesting right now, because what you're talking about is the meta blockchain. So you have the blockchain, which is the totality of everything that's been done. Satoshi's original vision was the vision of inclusive accountability, meaning that when you get a transaction, you are always able to verify, if you have a full node, that what you're looking at has two properties. It has not been double spent and the tokens exist. So it's just yours. Well, what happens if you don't have a full copy of the blockchain? Can we create a meta blockchain that contains proofs about the blockchain, that when you transmit that proof is as good as having a full copy of the chain? This is part of a broader conversation of what's called verified computation. And what people are trying to do is show that the state of a program, whether that be a long-running blockchain program or a dApp or whatever it have you, that is what you think it is, what you've been told. So you can check the proof yourself, and the security assumptions are very similar to having a full copy of the blockchain. So you'll see a huge amount of work that's been done in the zero knowledge space. It's pretty remarkable, from recursive snarks to rollups. There's the anon creds in the identity space. There's a legion of use and utility, and there's a lot of projects like Midnight pursuing this, and it's using Pluto Eris with Halo. You have the whole Planck space that's been fleshed out. There's a lot of adherents like the ZK EVM, ZK Sync is doing their thing, Starkware is doing their thing. So it's a very fertile area. And there's just a ton of papers. Hyperplonk is another example. That was Benedict Bunce's work out of Stanford. And that's one of the fastest growing areas, because it's absolutely essential. It's less about the blockchain and blockchain's architecture. It's more about the meta blockchain, the proofs about properties of the system that can be transmitted with the transaction, so you don't have to have a copy of the full node. It's essential for scaling. But another very fertile area of access is starting to say, if we run blockchain systems on different types of hardware that have special properties, perhaps that can give us new capabilities. The most obvious example of that is trusted hardware. So trusted execution environments, and layering that with things, for example, like oracles, where if it gets exposed to something, it can preserve that, sign it, and you can't forge what you've seen. So there were papers like Town Crier and others that explore this concept to its logical extreme. Bridges are another example where it enforces the logic of cross-chain transactions and bridges, governance, key management, other things, and it runs in specialized hardware that's hard to corrupt, even from the people who own the hardware. That's an example of a bespoke operating environment. Well, quantum computers would be yet another bespoke operating environment. And that's really the point of Qsig, is to talk around what does the horizon look like over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and what are the pioneering pieces of work that are being done in the horizon. And what's really exciting is if you can achieve something like a one-shot signature, then you can unlock a large amount of things that in the Ethereum ecosystem in particular, they think are impossible. Now, in the Cardano ecosystem, we have very strong academic disagreements about protocol design. For example, we feel that you can do a proof of stake system with 50% security threshold instead of a third. We feel that you can bootstrap from Genesis. We feel that you don't need to have a slashing or bonding mechanism for finality or for ensuring your chain is secure. And the evidence for that is Cardano has been running for many years with Shelley and beyond, and the system has never had an issue. And we have academic papers and rigorous mathematical proofs that have been peer-reviewed that showcase that. And this is the year where Genesis, the final version of Ouroboros for the first iteration of it, will ship with right around the same time as Chang. So the Ethereum people think that that's not possible, which is why they've introduced the scheme that they've introduced. Well, regardless of those differences, we can both agree that if one-shot signatures existed, it's a moot point on both sides. You don't have to use key evolving signatures. You don't have to have these rigorous academic debates. You have, by a quantum property of the key construction, the ability to destroy a signature after a single use. You also have, by a quantum property, the ability to embed through the speed of light and some calculations, the location where the key was generated and used, which can open up the possibility of geotagging the level of decentralization and geographic participation inside your system. So you can actually see where your servers are. So there's hundreds of use cases that come out of this. And there's a lot of great world-class experts at the University of Edinburgh and in our broader labs at Stanford and Tokyo Institute of Technology. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see what the Ethereum Foundation brings to bear. As critical as we can be of each other from times, there are a lot of great people in the Ethereum ecosystem who are quite bright and quite talented and quite applied. And they have a gargantuan ecosystem that's worth well over $200 billion with billions of dollars of transactions on a daily basis. So it's tremendously exciting that they've actually taken interest in a piece of research that we created. And it's tremendously exciting to see where these types of collaborations can go. For my part, it would be really cool to figure out if there's a way to talk around what a special piece of hardware, just like trusted execution environments, would look like that could facilitate the creation of these types of signature schemes. And that could actually become effectively the miner of the cryptocurrency ecosystem, of the proof of stake ecosystem, especially something that you could put maybe in a PCI card or in a USB stick that could be an augmentation to a stake pool that would have a new class of signature. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. And I'm really excited, if anything, just to kind of talk around the software and hardware implications and future research that can be done. And it is really exciting to see the Ethereum Foundation take a keen interest in this research line. And I think it will attract a lot more investment and a lot more excitement about it. And it just showcases the power of collaboration. When we look to the future, the reality is that if you look at Ethereum, Algorand, Solana, Cardano, Avalanche, all of these projects, they're not too far apart in terms of philosophy. And unfortunately, there's this cognitive effect where when people are just slightly apart but agree on most things, they tend to actually fight more than people who are very far apart. And actually disagree on a lot of things. For example, all the time through Hyperledger and other organizations, we interact with very centralized institutions that are highly regulated in the legacy world. And we actually have a very cordial relationship with the R3 people and the Fabric people and litany of other actors that are in the permission blockchain space and are subject to banking regulations, and we hang out with them. Where we seem to have the most fights are people who, at least on the surface, value decentralization, value people being their own bank, and principles like inclusive accountability. So it's just a strange artifact of cognition and how people tend to socially associate with the people. But if you allow yourselves a moment to take a step back and look to the future, you realize that you can overcome that bias, and you can find common ground with people, even people that you disagree with. So I'm very excited to attend Qsig, and I hope this is the first of many collaborations we can find and discussions we can find. All great collaborations begin with discussions. And I hope that it leads to co-authoring papers, and I hope it leads to good R&D. It's important to understand that Reddit and Twitter, social media, and a lot of the crypto YouTube space is not reality. People say ridiculously harsh, unfair, and extremely toxic things. And they make value judgments online about people that they wouldn't even consider saying in person to a person's face. That's just the way the world works, and that's where we're currently at. And it's no secret and no hidden thing that a lot has been said about me within the Ethereum ecosystem, including books that have been written, which I feel are horrendously unfair and completely miss my entire totality of my career. According to many within the Ethereum ecosystem, the only thing I ever did of relevance was the 6 months that I spent at Ethereum, And even then, that was all a fraud. And every single other thing either didn't happen or it's a scam. And it is quite curious that we notice that it's very difficult for people at the Ethereum Foundation ever to even say the Cardano word or my name. For example, I just saw a 3-minute video from the Ethereum Foundation discussing the one-shot signatures paper. Not once did they mention Cardano, input output, or any of the people affiliated with us. Just an interesting artifact. And I would trump that up to just the partisan nature of our industry as a whole, and perhaps opinions people have formed about people they've never met. And so another great example of what these workshops can do is it allows us to go beyond Twitter, Reddit, and these other media, which are horrifically unfair and one-dimensional, and it allows us to actually talk to people as real people and find common ground with people. And generally speaking, at the end of such things, if you've done them right, it puts you in a good position to actually start real conversations that are collaborative and productive. We're never going to agree on everything, and the name of the game isn't to be popular or even liked, but it is to be respected from a position that we do good work. Input-output research, whether you think we're real or not, has published 201 papers. It's a pretty phenomenal amount of papers, over 10,000 citations, and we've collaborated with 168 scientists in more than 50 countries. Our work has appeared at the top of every major conference in the cryptography space, which is how peer review is done in computer science. It's not a journal-centric, it's a conference-centric peer review system. That's a fact. It's an undeniable fact. And so given that we're at the top of our game and our publications appeared with co-authors, in this example from Princeton and other places, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon University, in addition to people from Harvard, MIT, people all across Europe and the top institutions there and the top institutions in Asia. And we're just getting started. And they're interdisciplinary publications covering everything from game theory and mechanism design to distributed systems to programming language theory to consensus research. You name it, we've done it. We even have a zero knowledge lab at the University of Edinburgh, staffed by people from Microsoft Research at the Cambridge campus, who have now gone on and created some really interesting things. For example, Markov Kohlweiss, who won the Gödel Prize. Some of our senior research fellows include a fellow of the Royal Society, Phil Wadler, who was also there as an undergraduate at Stanford working in the lab that created the internet with Vint Cerf. In fact, Phil Wadler, as an undergraduate, created the first online computer game as a mechanism to test the early internet. You can Google that and look it up. He later on went and created the Haskell programming language. This is one of the minds of many who created Plutus, the programming language of Cardano. When all we do is pay attention to Twitter, Reddit, and the social milieu or very inaccurate books, then what ends up happening is that tends to be ignored, glossed over, or we just pretend like it doesn't exist at all. And somehow, some way that this movement would have just magically materialized out of its own without any coordination from input-output, which is a preposterous and extraordinary statement. Research requires coordination, funding, and a mission. And the mission we've been on for over 7 years now has been building out this corpus of not just today, but the future. Everything from how to measure decentralization, to how to measure the value of an ecosystem, to on-chain decentralized governance, to how to represent the blueprints of a cryptocurrency in a formal language that's machine understandable, to how to rewrite math itself at the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics, which is making phenomenal progress using Lean to rewrite the whole bedrock and foundations of mathematics in a way that's machine understandable and one can apply these amazing innovations in AI towards. These are just some small examples and sampling of the things that we've achieved. Now, if you listen to Bankless or any of these other services, none of this exists. So I hope that 2024 is the year where we break through all of that and people recognize good research for the sake of good research. And people recognize there's a lot to gain in coordination and collaboration. We're working actively with the Algorand ecosystem. When we look at Mithril, for example, the ALBA paper that we just published was published with Leo Raisin, who was working with the Algorand ecosystem on papers like compact certificates. And it's made us better, and it's made them better. We talk to John Woods from time to time. And in fact, just recently, Hedera Hashgraph and John got together, and they've announced a decentralized wallet restoration effort. The first thing I did when I read the announcement, was reach out to Ramon, our CTO, and say, hey, that sounds really cool. Go talk to John and see if there's a way that we can work together on that, because that's something that benefits the industry as a whole. We contribute to web standards. For example, the W3C's DID standard, being part of that ecosystem with Prism. We contribute all the time to cryptography, including comments to NIST on post-quantum crypto. And when you take a look at a lot of the other relationships that we forged throughout the years, we talk all the time, everybody from Mina to Ergo, the Polkadot ecosystem most recently, especially with Midnight, and there's going to be a ton of cross-pollination there. We love the people at Concordium. Lars is a really good friend of mine, and we work with their research group. Most recently, we've been examining Concordium BFT, which is a phenomenal variant of hot stuff. So under the hood, there's an incredibly fertile set of relationships with many different blockchain ecosystems to understand very deeply where and when we can find common ground that benefits the space as a whole. And I'd like to remind everybody that every single line of code we write ends up as Apache 2, open source code that every single person can use. And I'd like to remind everybody that every paper we write is Attribution Creative Commons that you can use in your own project. So the mere existence of input-output research and our infrastructure arm has provided a massive amount of code, concepts, and papers for the industry as a whole to learn from, grow from, and hopefully be able to use in their own endeavors. For those Bitcoin maximalists out there, Cardano is the single best ecosystem to study if the desire was ever there to add smart contracts to Bitcoin, because we are the largest extended UTXO smart contract system in the world. And we're one with years of track record on that programming model and how to build DeFi applications with an accounting model that is a natural extension of the Bitcoin ecosystem. The Cardano native asset standard is a realization of concepts that came from the Color Coins ecosystem long ago. So just by studying Cardano, there's a beautiful roadmap on the programmability and asset issuance, if ever desired, with Bitcoin. If Bitcoin ever wanted to add use and utility to its proof of work system, there's an entire research thread called Useful Proof of Work, which we published some groundbreaking research in that, if followed, could actually allow Bitcoin to become one of the largest computers in the world for hire and still achieve the same level of mining security and not materially change the mining protocol. The same for NEPA-POWs, non-interactive proofs of proof of work, which ended up as being one of the core bases for a Fly client, an approach to add sidechains to Bitcoin and add light miners. These are just facts, and they may be inconvenient to some, but they exist. And our existence, I'd like to believe, is a net positive. And I think Qsig is a great way to open the year. And my hope is that as we close out 2024, each and every one of us is a bit more collaborative, and each and every one of us values and understands that we all bring something to the table. For my part, I have been a bit partisan, especially over social media. A lot of things are done in good fun and jest, but some people don't take it that way. And they take it as an attack or an insult, and they view me as edgy. So we can always try to be better, and we can always try to be more diplomatic. And I'm sorry if I've ever offended anybody in the statements that I've made. I am very passionate about our beliefs and approaches, but we can always say things in a more diplomatic way. But I will never apologize for the existence of Cardano or my belief that it is an elite cryptocurrency, and we have achieved great things with a great ecosystem and great people. Nor will I ever apologize for what I feel is a preservation and protection of the core principles upon which this industry was founded. It is not optional to measure decentralization and seek out increasing it. It is not optional to preserve and protect inclusive accountability and determinism and other basic properties that we take for granted with concepts like Bitcoin, but we're losing in other ecosystems for the sake of convenience, adoption, and ultimately commercialization. It's not okay to trade philosophy for money. And wherever I see that being done, small or large, I of course will be a critic. That doesn't mean people are stupid, but it does mean that they value different things than what I value, and they value different things than the design principles upon which Cardano was founded. But true to form, Cardano is embracing a recursive governance structure, SIP 1694. And that structure actually gives the community the ability to radically change, if so desired, the design principles of the system, for better or for worse. If they want to abandon the principles of determinism, inclusive accountability, or fixed monetary policy, which brought me into the space and many others into the space, including the Bitcoin revolution, and moved to something else for the sake of expediency, that is the prerogative of the community and the great social experiment that we are entering into with the concepts of on-chain governance. Now, good governance means you make such things hard to do, and it takes time and deliberative effort to truly get in that direction, because people have to be fully aware of the consequences of the decisions they make and what they lose once they violate those decisions. As we saw, for example, with the Ethereum versus Ethereum Classic debate that happened so long ago. But you have to believe, if you embrace decentralization, that people need to have the freedom to fail. And people need to have the freedom to make decisions. And sometimes decisions that we personally feel could be poor decisions may in the long run actually be quite good ones and necessary ones. And that's the point of concepts like idea flow and decentralized governance and self-amending games, such as what Peter Suber brought us with Nomic, and what we're now experiencing with ecosystems like Tezos and soon to be Cardano with the self-amending concept. Where we can add value is being the wise old guard to remind people of the consequences of what they do and show them paths to achieve that in the least disruptive way possible. The next 5 years are going to be the most productive and consequential of our industry. And what they're going to do is solidify a philosophy of the industry. The winners and losers are not people who get rich. The reality is that most of the people who are OGs in the crypto space, who've done cryptocurrencies for a while, they're okay, financially speaking. It's not really about that. The winners and losers are the philosophies. And those philosophies are either going to be that you're in control of your own money, you're your own bank, you're in control of consent, you get to decide directly how things evolve, and people have to ask you. And ultimately, you can check everything. Nobody can stop you from doing that. Or we can regress back to the world we're trying to replace, a world of centralization, a world of custodians, a world of high regulation, a world where you're told what you're allowed to think, do, feel, and you have no voice. The current world financial order, you have absolutely no say in how your money works, who mints it, how much of it there is, how it's stored, what you're allowed to do with it. At any given moment, your bank account could be shut down, a transaction can be reversed, and at any given moment, a social credit notion can be attached to our money, especially in the age of CBDCs, and you can be told that what you buy, what you do, you're just not allowed to do that anymore. This is the dream of the people currently attending WEF. And this is a reality for almost 2 billion people within the orbit of Belt and Road in China, as we witness the People's Bank of China merge their CBDC with social credit. That will come by default to Europe and to North America, and every person alive will be in some version of that system, soft or hard. The next 5 years, the innovations we make in this industry are going to determine whether we have a third option between total anarchy and chaos in this dystopian reality of having a well-functioned global system that does have a notion of regulation and controls and consumer protections, but also preserves human rights at its core, our freedoms of association, commerce, and expression. Or if we surrender all of that for the sake of short-term profits to the very same people that have always taken it from us and give them a superpower that they will never give back. I, for one, don't want to live in that world. And I'd like to believe the reason why cryptocurrency has grown so much over the last 15 years has been principally because you don't want to either. So events like Qsig are small in that they're just one day and they're in just one location, and it's just two organizations coming together with an academic referee. talking around what could be done. But what they signify is setting aside small differences in a recognition of a larger difference, which is we'd like to be in charge of our own money, and we'd like to give everybody a little bit more liberty and freedom. As long as we remember those broad brush strokes, I think we can forget the small ones and we can move on to a better world. So I can't wait to see the people in Scotland very soon. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see what comes of this. And even if it's nothing, at least it was a good conversation. And we really appreciate them reaching out to us. And it's going to be an interesting time. And I hope it gives you some value, the books that I showed you. And if you do read them, you can get an appreciation for how transformative quantum computers truly will be to the world around us. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you guys soon. Cheers.